Welcome back everyone, and here we are with another video. This one sees us having, from the wonderful people at T238, they have supplied me one of their new Mosfets to have a look at. Now, for some of you that have been watching the channel, you may have seen an earlier video where we put into this toy here one of the T238 brushless motors, where they basically followed that up with, can we send you one of our new Mosfets? Now, the Mosfet that's in here, if we show you, is apparently one of their brand new ones, and it is what they call their V3 Pro. So it's going for a V3 gearbox, and that's one of them there. So T238. Now, I have never ever used the T238 Mosfet, so this is totally new to me. And as you can see, I haven't even unwrapped this yet. So we're going to do all that together, so I can learn about it. At the same time, you can learn about it. Now, fortunately, despite them originally with the motor on here, they gave us a long shaft motor. It just happens that because we chose that toy, it actually has a V3 gearbox, which obviously is an unusual combination with a long shaft motor and a V3 gearbox. Normally for a V2 and the V3s have a short shaft. However, it just happens to be that where we set that up in there, when they contacted me about this and said, can you do it? I was like, absolutely, I will pair it up with the motor that you'd provided. So let's not muck about anymore. Let's get this unwrapped and let's have a look at what's inside. Okay, so we have got a cool patch. Don't know what they are, but I'm sure we'll learn more about those. They're obviously some sort of important stickers. We've then got a little packet of connectors, and then there it is. Okay, so this, on first look, this looks like this has got two sides to it. I should hope it does, because you're never going to get the trigger in there otherwise. Gently, gently. Okay, so, well, it looks pretty impressive so far, but I do think what we're going to have to do, before I do anything, I'm going to have a look in here, because as I say, I've never used one of these before, so we should probably do it properly. So I'm going to have a little look at this, and I'll come back to you in a minute when I know what I'm doing. So, after a little bit of reading through the book of words, obviously there's a few things we'd probably expect on here if we're going to put a Mosfet into one of the toys. There's a few of the safety things. You've got things like the low battery protection. You've got things that are going to protect it if it's overheating. If the gearbox jams up or locks up, it's going to protect the circuit so that everything doesn't overload and blow up. More of the interesting stuff though, looks like we're going to have multiple shooting modes on there for very, I should think, burst fires and auto fires. We've got pre-cocking to preload the piston between shots to make semi more responsive. It looks like there's things like active braking on here. Now obviously we're not going to be using that with the brushless motor because they don't like it. So that's all on there. We've got adjustable rates of fire, and then of course it looks like this is the programming. So it seems to say here that on the semi mode you can either have semi-auto, double tap, and anything from a 3-round to a 6-round burst. So you could have anything from between 1 and 6 BBs, leaving the barrel at one pull of the trigger there. And in the auto mode, it's slightly different. It gives you full auto, and then a 3, a 6, or a 9-round burst on there. So they're all programmable. So that all looks fine. A little bit about installation, but I'm sure we can blag that. That can't be too difficult. Yeah, I think so. And then this is all about how we enter the programming, but we'll look at that when it's actually installed. I think it's probably the best option there. And then it's got all the wonderful codes in the back for, I'm assuming, the number of beeps between each program mode. But I think let's just put the thing in and see what happens. Okay, so here we are in the gearbox. There goes the trigger. Now, the bits we're going to be replacing are purely the trigger system. So as you can see, this is of a similar sort of shape to everything that's going to fit in there. So essentially that's where this is going to go. So before we can start look at putting that anywhere near it though, so we'll put that to one side for just a moment, we're going to strip out everything. So the easiest way I think of doing this is take out all the bits. All the bits. Here we go. So let's take all that out over there. Let's remove some of the gears. So we'll take that off. Now at this point, being careful not to move your shims, especially if it's something you've already previously shimmed. Nothing like undoing all your hard work. So we're going to put that like that. that like that, and we'll put that to one side. So I'm going to strip out those. So that is all the original wiring out the way. Obviously the trigger we're still going to need, so we're going to put that to one side, which will also require the trigger spring, but we're not going to need any of the trigger trolley or the spring that went with it. So those can be discarded. And the other thing we're going to need to remove is the semi-release lever, because it's going to be done on, I believe, optical on this Mosfet. So we're going to take that out. We will probably need this still, because that's obviously what's going to fix the Mosfet in, that little screw, so we won't lose that. And if we take this out of the way, then absolutely fine. So what I suggest we do first, we're going to give it a clean up so we're not putting the Mosfet into anything horrible greasy. So let's do that, and then let's have a look at fitting the Mosfet itself. Okay, so with that cleaned, that is ready, I think, for the Mosfet to be installed. Now, obviously, a few things I've been scratching my head on. Now, obviously, quite familiar with Mosfets in general. Obviously, never seen one of these before. Now, obviously, I can see that that's going to go in like this. There's a few other things in the packaging. For example, this little pouch that we moved earlier had loads of bits in it. Now, obviously, they provided a Tamiya. That's obviously if you haven't got Deans, you can change it. Let's assume that. So let's get rid of those. So we're not going to need them. That bit, I don't really know what that's for. I did manage to find some stuff online through their online instructions that apparently it fits kind of over these in some way, but I think the size between the way that and that actually marry up is fine. So we're gonna discard that bit for a minute. No idea, but let's get rid of it. Obviously those are spare terminals, some heat shrink, we know what that is. These possibly something to do with the sensors, I should think, being stickers. That bit, I'm gonna guess, because I don't know how the camera is gonna see that, but that's got like two shaped stickers. Now that seems to marry up with the back of the Mosfet, so I'm gonna stick them on there in case that's some sort of insulation thing against the metal gearbox housing. So we'll do that. And these two bits, well, I have no idea what they're for. Now, obviously just digging deeper onto this, from what I can kind of see online with T238's online instructions, I think they're referring to these, because I've seen some diagrams of these attaching to here. Now, I have never seen or could think of where that would go in an airsoft toy. Now, I do know that obviously they advertise these things for gel blasters. Now, I've never seen a gel blaster in person. Whether that is going to be to connect or power something, I have literally no idea. But I think what we're going to do, because they're metal, and there's obviously lots of components in the airsoft toy that are metal, and given that if we look at this feed here, so if you imagine you've got a battery connected up at the top, that is a direct feed into here, which also means that's a direct feed from the battery to this. Now that just shouts short circuit to me.
Hello, bozos!
So what we'll probably do is, until I find out if they're actually anything relevant, which I can't imagine they are, we're just going to cover them up, insulate them. I might even chop them or get rid of them, because I don't think we need them for the airsoft world, if I'm honest. But it is new to me, so if I do learn that, I will share that with you, but I don't think we're going to find that out in this video. But for the purpose of those, we'll insulate them off so they're not going to affect anything, and God knows what they are. So we're also going to put those to one side as well. Okay, so with the stickers that I mentioned on there you can see that a bit better now. I've peeled them off. What I've done, because I have no idea, and I can't see a single mention in any of the instructions about these things, so we're going to go on best guess assumptions with this installation. I've stuck them on the back there, so we can see them there. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be a thing for installation. I know, obviously, with the airsoft stuff, we have metal gearboxes. I do, on my limited understanding of gel blasters, I think some of them have plastic gearboxes, so whether that is some form of insulation on there, I don't think it's going to hurt having them stuck there, and that's the only place I can see them fit perfectly. I wouldn't have said I'm the best at jigsaw puzzles, but that definitely seems to fit. So we're going to go with that, and we're going to try and put this in now, and we're going to see if we can make it work. Okay, so that is now sat nicely in the gearbox shell. Now, it was a bit of a squeeze with the cable at its front end, but I didn't need any further modification to the shell. So that's good. Bit of a fiddle, but it has gone in. Now, the other thing I did notice and find in that little bag of bits, which I didn't show you earlier, was this little plastic washer, if you can see that. Now, we're going to go with a guess and say that that is probably, again, some sort of insulation thing on there, so that when we put in the original screw, now this is the screw that was holding the semi-release lever in, because of course we're utilising the same thread point. We're going to put that in. Now, there is, and here's a top tip, and that's not just for this MOSFET, for any MOSFET you fit that's going to fit like that, where it's so close to the sector gear. What you want to do is, because there is the risk that depending on how thick the board is and how thick your insulation is, that might lift the head of that ever so slightly to what it was when it was recessed into the semi-release lever. So it's always good practice, no matter what you're doing, to make sure that the head of that screw is well clear, and in this case it is absolutely fine. I have seen some, not necessarily these MOSFETs, because I say this is the first one I've done, where that is a little bit close in there, and it can hit it. In this case it is absolutely fine, but just a little tip in there. You can have that one, no charge, that's free, that bit of knowledge. So that's going to go in there quite nicely, I think, so that's fine. So our next step then is we're going to look at the trigger installation. Now, obviously we can assume it goes straight in. Obviously, while I've been reading this, and I did a little search with a little QR code on the back. Now, that brought up some very old manuals that obviously the T238 was provided online from like 4 years ago. Now, in some of those manuals I saw, it was saying about cutting that bit off of here. I'm not convinced, because on this one, it doesn't actually hit anything, or not that I can see, even with the top half of the MOSFET on. But what it does look like is, I don't know how well the camera's going to see this because it is so small. There's two sensors there. And when this sits on here ready, let's see if I can get it to do it, to replicate this. It almost looks like that if we have that on there like so, it sits slightly clear of the two sensors. So obviously as the trigger is pulled, I would imagine that's going to break those sensors, and that's the bit that what triggers it. So I'm going to educated guess and say that we do not need to modify that, even though when I've explored that on their own link, I saw stuff from ages ago cutting off. Let's leave it for now, because I don't think it's going to cause a problem. And if it needs to come off, we shall revisit it later in the video and you shall see that. But otherwise, we're going to leave that on for now. So I think that in itself is all nice and easy. Obviously, that's going to go in here like so. So when that's in there, the rest of that is going to sit on the top like so. So that is what it's going to look like when it's all installed. All I've now got to do is put the rest of the internals of the gearbox back, put that in there, connect it all, rebuild it all, connect all the motor, and then hope for the best. Fingers crossed. So let me get this reassembled and then we'll have a look together. Okay, update discovered on the reassembly. So, a moment ago when we were going through all the little bits, I said we'd found this, and I wasn't entirely sure, but I had seen on an older manual that it was suggested it went on the pins of the MOSFET. Now, I can see why we do it, and I'll show you what we're going to do with it in just a second, but just to show you how I've discovered it, when we look in here, can you see, obviously the board is coming down here. Now that is not sitting flush with the top of the gearbox, and you can also see it here as well. If I get this and push this down, ready? So using my favourite gold screwdriver, if I push that all the way down, so can you see the gap in here on the pins where it doesn't quite reach? So if I push that down, you can now see the gap in the gearbox. Now the problem we have there is, okay, at the front here it might not matter too much, but at the back, where we're going to have the gear spinning, that means the gear is going to hit that MOSFET. So let me open this. What we are going to do, if we take this back off of here, we are going to cut strips out of this, I think that's my understanding of it, and we're going to push that down so that the pins go through it. That will provide a cushion which is going to support this to the top side of the gearbox. So there we go, that makes sense of that one. So let me do that and I'll show you before it goes back in. So what we've done then at this point, that little block of stuff, so we've still got the sticky side there, sticky side's got the yellow bit on it, so I'm literally going to peel that off and we're going to stick that on there, ready? So we take that off and we're going to get that on top of there. Apparently this should just push through. This is what the instruction manual said. This is terrifying. I do not want to break the pins. So yeah, that has gone on. So if we push that down like so, I think it's easier using, again, my favourite little gold screwdriver. I'm going to push it all the way down so that it sits flush with that. And then what that does is that just adds a bit of cushion to hold this top side of the Mosfet up to the top side of the gearbox, which most importantly in keeping that clear from the sector gear. So you've seen one, that's how it's done. I'm going to do the other side, and then when we put it together, we won't see that collide with important bits in the gearbox shell, basically. So there we have both sides covered in the little foam, which means when I put that back in there, like that, the top side of the gearbox will squish that down as much or as little as it needs to when it's closed. So we'll just show you it in a closed position. Now, one more thing I just noticed where we were talking about raising the top of the Mosfet to the top of the gearbox, you'll see here I've just done a little bit of modification. Where it's shiny, I've just taken a bit of material off because that was pushing down the tail end of this Mosfet board, and again it was going to push it too close to the gear. I hadn't spotted it first time around because obviously the whole thing was sat down too low anyway, but on getting the rest of it to the right position, I then saw that that was having a bit too much pressure on it, and again we risk it hitting the sector gear, which is just going to damage it. Now that may or may not be the same with any other gearboxes. Some gearboxes are slightly different. This one has a bit of a raised edge around some of the gears. Some of them may not have it, so it may not be an issue, but in that scenario, that is what I'd have to done on this particular toy. So here it is now all assembled, all the relevant little modification and bits that we were going to do, and hopefully you can see on here that the Mosfet now sits at the top of the gearbox nicely, and I don't know if I can get the angle right, but there's a gap, nice gap between it and the sector gear. So that's not going to cause any problems. And we can see at the front here the bit we looked at earlier, because we've got these nice big squidgy cushiony bits in, that is keeping the actual circuit board to the top of the gearbox. So I'm pretty confident that that is now installed correctly. Our next step is going to be on the other side here. And it's going to be for the fire selector, so that everything knows what mode it's supposed to be in. And obviously with the fire selector moves on the side of the toy, it's going to move the selector plate back and forth. Now the actual sensor for it is here. Now again, it doesn't mention it in here, but let's make some assumptions based on what we know. Now we know we want two positions, well 3 positions if you include semi. Now, I think this is where these little white stickers are going to come in. Now, I can only imagine that when this is in full auto, this is going to be all the way back here. So it itself doesn't quite cover the sensors, but we can overlap the sticker. So I would think when those are covered, it thinks it's in full. When that's forward, obviously the sticker's going to move with it, and it'll end here, and then it'll have no sticker over it, and then it'll put it in semi. And then when we push it forward, it will still think it's in semi, but the thing that makes it safe is the fact that the trigger isn't going to be able to be pulled. So I think when it's in that position, obviously safe because you can't do the trigger. When the trigger is able to be pulled and that's going back, that's going to be semi. And when it goes all the way back, we'll make sure the sticker that we put on overlaps the sensors, and that will be full auto. So let's make that an educated guess. Let's make that happen. Now, I know I did if you didn't have a trigger in, that comes off pretty easy, but with a bit of wiggling, it'll come off. So then just like that, that's with the sticker on. So I've made it protrude ever so slightly. That's what it looks like from the underside. So it's nicely stuck on. I made sure it was all clean of grease and things to ensure that the sticky is going to stick properly. All we have to do is manipulate this back on here, because it's nice flexible plastic. As long as you're careful with it, get all the bits in the right position, then it will slide back into place and be perfect. So what does this look like now? So when we've got it in safe, it obviously locks the trigger to make it safe. When it's going to be put into semi, that's going to sit somewhere in the middle there, allowing the trigger to go. When we want it into the all-important full auto mode, that is going to come over the sensor like that, just to cover it up. We'll do it a few times just to make sure it goes smoothly and it doesn't get caught or snag. Yeah, I think that's safe to say that that should work. Okay, perfect. So I think we need to reassemble it so it's a whole toy again with all the bits in it, and we'll see if it works. So here it is, all reassembled. Now, before we can test it, we need to make the motor wires fit. They're a little bit long, so we'll shorten those off so they actually fit in there nice and neatly, like so, without all the excess on there. Same on the positive wire. These bits, I still don't know 100% what they're for. I don't think they're related to airsoft, so I'll probably cut them down a bit, just cover them with a bit of tape so they're insulated. And annoyingly, I might have to extend the cable here so that it can fit up the top for the battery, because I don't think that's going to be quite long enough. But we'll worry about that bit in a minute. Let's get it working first. Okay, so up to this point, we are now all back together. I've cut and insulated the unusual wires at the front that we're not going to be using, and of course I've made the motor terminals fit in there. So here we go. Now I haven't connected this yet, so let's see what it does. Now we're going to go with the 11.1 volt battery as we connect. Ready? Okay, so it's made a beep to say it's there. So are we ready? Let's see if the gearbox will cycle with the pull of this trigger. No, but to be fair, that could just be it setting itself with the sensors, so I reckon it will go on the next pull. Ready? And full auto. Oh, it beeped as I switch between the... Oh, it does it. It beeps as I switch between the modes. Ready? Not sure how keen I am on that. Maybe we can turn it off. Okay, let's try full. Okay, it sounds pretty good. Yeah, I don't know if I like that. Bam, 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 bam. Don't know if I like that. Maybe we'll see about turning it off in a minute. So initially that works, which is a good start. Okay, so we're at a different point in the video now, in the sense of a completely different turn of events. You'll notice I have now got another battery attached to the back, as well as the 11.1 that I was intending on using, because... There is it. No. So basically what's happened, I was having a little play after assembling this all together, getting my head around some of the programming things so I could show you guys here on the YouTube. Now, basically what's happened, if I disconnect, reconnect, makes the noise. We have no response on the trigger, and yet you can hear there's power, you can hear the selector changing, because it does that really annoying beep. However, in neither mode does the trigger work. Now, it decided it was going to do this midway through me, well, not even midway, at the beginning of me turning the camera back on to show you and to go through some of the programming bits. Let's just see the bit that this actually died. Ready? Okay, so there we go. We are all fully reassembled. Everything is all in there. Now I've got one of the stick batteries, the 11.1 volt batteries that I would intend to use in this. And currently we have got on semi-auto. Brilliant. So literally, I don't think it's something I've done. Now, I had even tried it on a different motor as well. So I put that in so we weren't running on the brushless. And it has exactly the same symptoms with whatever motor you connect into it. So I'm pretty confident that whatever is causing it to do what it's doing, it's got to be related to the actual MOSFET that's in it. Okay, so having opened up the gearbox again to have a look, what I think has happened on this occasion is you see the two sensors here. We've got the one with a little black bit and the one that no longer has a black bit on it. I think what's happened is the top of that first sensor has come detached in some way. Now, at first I did think that, oh no, you know how we were talking earlier in the video about this top bit, maybe it's that, but no, it's clearly not. That's well clear. I then wondered if the actual mechanism of the trigger, the rear part here, was actually hitting it, but it doesn't seem to, because if I get hold of it and I function it as if it was being pulled, it doesn't actually get to it because it hits the lower part of the board before it hits the actual sensor. So I don't think that there's any influence the trigger has had physically on that failing. I think it's just come off. Now, I did feed this back to the team at T238 that provided me the MOSFET, and they did say they had sent some of these out to other techs to have a play with as well, and I'm not the first one to have come across that issue apparently, and they did point out that it is just in its prototype stages at this moment. So this was kind of an initial release that they sent out to a few of us to have a play around with, and obviously that feedback they're going to take on board and redo it. So hopefully I've been told I'm going to get the revamped version once that's all been completed, which will hopefully solve this issue. But for now, that is why that seems to have failed on this occasion. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, everyone, and I will see you all in the next one.